Hello team. Since this is a voiceover, I am going to freestyle this a little bit. And yeah, let's start with the system nerfs. These kits are getting a slight nerf, but Soy hasn't been using them lately anyways, so this nerf shouldn't affect her that much. And for phasers, if you've seen my phasers video, you should know how strong it can be on Zoe and how you should use it sometimes at least. And this nerf should not change that fact. Moving on to the system buffs, so some of these changes will have a slight effect on Zoe, so let's see them. Now, I used to run this rune when it first got released, and it does have decent value, but since Zoe is an early game champion, where Zoe shines the most, before her first item complete, I do not recommend this rune. Next up is Guardian, and this is an interesting buff since its AP ratio is being buffed, so if you play Zoe support in high-elo, this could be a strong pick actually. And I did try this out a long time ago, but overall I would still recommend damage rune for Zoe support at least. Okay, so Hail of Blades is being buffed for melee champions, and so I can't really use it, but do be careful against Echo that is being buffed with this buff, or against a support champ like Pike. Yeah, keep that in mind. Next is Legend Bloodline. Just nah. So the small movement speed shot is getting a decent buff, going from 2% to 2.5%. But I don't know if you should use it or not, since you do sacrifice some strength for it. So yeah. Okay, next up is Nimbus Cloak buff, which might seem decent, but it's actually a very small buff for Zoe, because on Zoe's W she will always get the lowest percent value movement speed. So that means if Zoe uses her flash from her W, Zoe will get a 15% movement speed buff. But if she uses her actual flash, which is a 3-minute cooldown, she will get a 45% movement speed buff. Up next is the Tenacity Short buff. Honestly, it seems pretty scary, going from 10% to 15%, because many mid laners can and will use this now versus Zoe at least. So Zoe might need to move from burst builds to cooldown reduction builds. So like no Sorks, but instead Lucidity Boots, and no Shadow Flame, but instead Horizon. Because she doesn't have enough uptime on her spells for her to be able to deal with enemies that are slept for a shorter duration. So Triple Tonic is being buffed slightly, which is nice, but if you don't have inspiration as a keystone, as in Glacial or Spellbook or First Strike, I just don't think that the rune gives you the strength that you need before level 6. Now onto the champion adjustments. Scorn and Volibear are being changed, and all that matters for Zoe here really is that Scorner's ult, is that Riot increased Scorner ult's cast time So Zoe might have an easier time using her own ult reactively for Skarner's ult. And champion nerfs. Action is being nerfed, finally. Thank God. Zoe kind of struggles with action, so it's a good change for her. And LeBlanc is also being nerfed, but these nerfs won't really affect the Zoe versus LeBlanc map. Won't affect the Zoe versus LeBlanc matchup. So if you're a Zoe main, it's still recommended to perma ban LeBlanc. And Challenge Jungle Clear is also being nerfed, but it doesn't really matter for Zoe. Finally, the champion buffs. So for Aesol, his base movement speed is being increased by 5, so hitting an E on him might be a bit harder. Keep that in mind. And his Q burst base damage is also being increased, so don't try and tank his Q too much, right? Next is Blitzcrank. His E is being buffed early, very strongly early buffed. So if you play Zoe support with Blitzcrank, you might struggle early on. But after level 6, Zoe cannot get hooked because she can use her ult after being hooked, or well, shortly before being hooked, to stop being hooked, if that makes sense. And the last buff is Yon, his Q base damage being upped by 5. But I think the Zoe vs Yon match is still going to be Zoe favorite. That was all. And that was so much effort, by the way. That was so much effort. I had to cut out so many things. I had to say things 100 times over and over again. Hey. That's all, gang. Thanks for watching.